So let me say a few words about our guest speaker today, Veronica Akaezuwa, who is the lead of New Jersey's Voter Choice New Jersey Speaker Bureau team. And she's been leading a group of volunteers who speak around the state about RCV. Veronica has a bachelor's degree in communications from Rutgers University. Let's hear that for the home team, and a master's degree in economic and political development from Columbia University. And she's held management roles in research and data analysis. I think she's doing some interesting work in that regard now for the state of New Jersey for their innovation area. And as that would indicate, she recently pivoted to a career in public policy, where she focuses on innovative approaches to policy making that increase government transparency and enhance citizen participation. So welcome to the chapter meeting, Veronica, of Represent Us New Jersey, and the floor is yours.
Thank you for joining this talk. Thank you for the introduction, David. I will dive right into the presentation. Again, my name is Veronica Akaezuwa. I'm here on behalf of Voter Choice New Jersey, and we are a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization, and we're dedicated to ranked choice voting, or as we like to call it, RCV. We provide information about ranked choice voting, and we promote its adoption for all elections in New Jersey. In today's presentation, I'm going to cover 4 main areas. First, I will highlight the flaws in our current voting system, known as plurality voting, which many of you are very familiar with. You'll realize how our current system elects divisive candidates without earning majority support, which leads many Americans to feel like their vote doesn't count. We'll talk about the spoiler effect and strategic voting that shut out third parties and candidates who have great ideas, which leave voters feeling like they don't have any legitimate or meaningful candidates to choose from at the ballot box. Again, I'm sure many of you are familiar with these terms. Then I'll address the benefits of ranked choice voting, how it improves the flaws in our plurality voting system. Next, I'll demonstrate how ranked choice voting works. You'll see how simple it is in practice. And last, I'll talk about the growing ranked choice voting movement and the Voter Choice New Jersey strategic plan for the path forward in New Jersey. So I'll begin by addressing the flaws in our current voting system. So the way that most elections work in the United States today and in New Jersey is through plurality voting. And it's when a voter only gets to vote for one candidate, and the candidate who earned the largest portion of votes, or the plurality, is the winner. Now, the problem with plurality voting is when there are only 2 candidates on the ballot, it's fairly straightforward to determine which candidate has a majority support and is the winner of the election. In this example here, we have candidate A and candidate B. Candidate B earned 60% of support from the electorate and is the winner. However, plurality voting breaks down as a method when there are more than 2 candidates in a race, as we see here. When there are 3 or more candidates in a single winner race, plurality voting breaks down, especially when 2 of those candidates are similar to one another. And you can see in this slide, candidate B and C are colored in different shades of purple to represent that they are similar to one another. So maybe voters who like the purple party are now forced to divide their support among these two similar candidates. And this is called vote splitting. So we had the 60% we saw for candidate B that is now split. When the third candidate C joins the race, and that 60% is now divided between the two, and we have candidate B with 35% and candidate C with 25%. So we had 1/4 of the votes go to candidate C that would have otherwise been for candidate B. And because they split the vote, each candidate receives less of an overall distribution of votes. And candidate C is dubbed the degrading term of spoiler. Candidate A, representing the Orange Party, benefits from the split votes in the Purple Party and wins the election with a plurality, but not a majority of votes. And so a candidate who enters a race but who doesn't win shouldn't be able to sway the outcome of an election. And that is sort of what this scenario demonstrated. And so to avoid this bad outcome, voters may engage in what you're familiar with, I'm sure, a term called strategic voting. And so voters will support the predicted frontrunner who isn't their favorite candidate, but they'll vote for them in order to avoid wasting their vote and inadvertently electing their least favorite candidate. And so the problem is that trying to determine which candidates are likely to perform better is often based on public opinion. And public opinion is based on polls, which can be wrong or can contradict our own individual candidate preferences. And then on the other side of the coin, if your favorite candidate is one of the frontrunners, you hope that a similar candidate won't come along in the race and split their vote and hurt their chances of winning. So this is really a lose-lose situation. Our voting methods should unite rather than divide common interests. So what we'll do is we'll look at two kind of textbook examples of the spoiler effect and how it can sway election outcomes. I want to just emphasize that these examples are hypothetical that we'll talk about. They're textbook examples, but you know the kind of scenario will play out is hypothetical. So in 1992, the U.S. general election, Bill Clinton and George H.W. Bush were front runners in the election, each earning roughly 40% of the vote. Ross Perot, with 19% of the vote, was considered a potential spoiler candidate who split votes away from Bush Sr., which benefited Bill Clinton. And without Ross Perot's participation, it's possible that Bush Sr. would have been elected. It's also possible that without the notion of strategic voting or wasted votes, more voters in general would have voted and supported Ross Perot. And that would have been a signal to public opinion that the independent party was actually a viable party, rather than just the Democratic and Republican party. The 2000 general election is also a good example of how even a little support for a third candidate can have major impacts on election outcomes for frontrunners and for voters. Here, Bush and Gore were virtually tied, again, each with 49% of the vote, and this was an even smaller margin than between Bill Clinton and George H.W. Bush in our example earlier. Green Party Ralph Nader only had 1.5% of the vote, but that could have been enough to split votes from Gore and sway the election in Bush's favor. Without Nader present, Gore might have won. And so as Americans, we pride ourselves on free and fair elections, but we've just seen how plurality voting is a broken system that can undermine our democracy. The good news is that ranked choice voting is a solution. So ranked choice voting is a simple improvement to the way we vote that empowers voters to vote for their preferred candidate, encourages the participation of candidates and third parties, and it's more representative by ensuring that all voters' voices are heard. Voters rank candidates in order of preference. A candidate must earn a majority of votes, that's greater than 50%. And rather than choosing, again, one candidate, you can rank candidates in order of preference, first choice, second choice, third choice, and so on. Here is a sample ballot, a sample voting ballot. And we like to say here that when you vote for your first choice, this is the candidate you love. Your second choice is the candidate that you like. And your third choice is the candidate that you can stand. Now, what does counting ranked choice voting, what does counting votes in ranked choice voting look like? We're going to look at a hypothetical ranked choice voting election with 4 people running for the same seat. So we begin by counting voters' first choices, and then we're going to check for a majority winner. We see that candidate A has 55% of the votes, which is a clear majority. So that makes candidate A the winner in round 1. But what if there's no clear majority? And this is actually most often the case in our elections today. Here's another example of a different election where nobody has over 50% of the votes in round 1. So now what happens? We see here round 1, nobody has a majority. What we do is we have round 2 of vote counting, and we eliminate the candidate with the lowest share of votes. From round 1, that would be candidate D. And now the important distinction with ranked choice voting is that voters who selected candidate D are not eliminated. They get to have their second choices counted. Now we see, okay. Okay. So now we took the votes from candidate D and we distributed those. And we do another round of another round of counting to see that, again, there's no majority here in round 2. So we repeat the same steps as before, and we eliminate the candidate with the least amount of votes in this round 2 that happened to be candidate C with 20%. We eliminate them, kind of distribute their votes. And we see that candidate B has a majority with 55% of the vote, so they are the winner. Easy as that. And then notice that with plurality voting, candidate A, or the bright orange candidate here, would have been elected in round 1 with 40% of the votes. But the voters in this hypothetical district actually preferred the policies of the purple candidates, B and C. So with ranked choice voting, you have better group unity in the decision-making process because candidate B from the purple party is, in fact, who won the election under ranked choice voting. As we experience ranked choice voting, and there's growing familiarity with it, researchers can now study the effects of ranked choice voting effects on elections. So we're going to talk a little bit about ranked choice voting impact and benefits. Here, one major benefit is that numerous studies have shown ranked choice voting can increase campaign civility in today's hyper-partisan elections. And the Rutgers-Eagleton Institute of Politics polled California voters about 6 years back in 2013 and 2014, 7 years back, to find that voters were more satisfied with the conduct of candidate campaigns, and they perceived less candidate criticism and negative campaigning compared to voters in non-ranked choice voting cities. Studies also find that electoral outcomes for women and people of color are overall better in jurisdictions that have implemented ranked choice voting. Election data from 9 US cities show that on average, women's representation doubled after ranked choice voting was implemented, with nearly half of city council seats held by women, increasing 26 delta percentage points after ranked choice voting was implemented. And then again, a study in California also found an increase in people of color represented in their city council after these cities adopted ranked choice voting as well. And that was a 19 percentage point delta increase. I'll say, you may wonder why does ranked choice voting benefit women and people of color? And also, why does it increase campaign civility? And so really, ranked choice voting, it changes candidate election strategies. It encourages more civil discourse among candidates, which discourages negative campaigning. It reduces the risk of racially charged or gendered attacks. And so these are some of the reasons why we see these effects. So ranked choice voting, it empowers voters to express their true preferences for multiple candidates, so we don't have to worry about voting for someone we don't really like. It promotes majority support, so we know that our representatives really represent the will of the people. It minimizes the spoiler effect and vote splitting, so we don't have to worry about candidates drawing votes away from our favorite candidate. It increases campaign civility, so we don't have to suffer hearing negative messages. And it increases candidate representation so that we can benefit from new and different policy ideas. I may not have touched enough on the increased campaign civility, but I just want to reiterate that, a lot of times more candidates, it's strategic for them to appeal to a broader range of voters under ranked choice voting, because it incentivizes them to not only appeal to a small set of voters, because they won't be able to win a majority if that's the case. And so oftentimes what we see are candidates now vying not only for voters first choice, but also their second choice. And so often we see that candidates are more responsive to some of the more wider supported policies. David touched on this a bit. We do need to update this slide some, but we love this, this graphic. And so we'll be updating this. But ranked choice voting, as you know, isn't a new fad. It's been used nationally in the US and worldwide. It's been embraced by Republicans and Democrats and third parties alike. And it's worked, which is why it's growing. David mentioned that Maine was the first state to use ranked choice voting on a statewide level in 2018. He talked about Hawaii using this as well in 2022. Ranked choice voting is currently used in over 30 cities and many universities and organizations' elections. And it's also used in many national, state, and local elections around the world. Australia and Ireland have been using it for over a century. Okay, so now I will talk a bit about the Voter Choice New Jersey strategic plan. So our ultimate goal with at Voter Choice New Jersey is to get ranked choice voting in place for all New Jersey elections. Given the inertia in government and how challenging democracy reform is to win, this is a tall order. And so to reach this visionary future, we need clear goals that will make tangible progress on a path to ranked choice voting for all elections. So our 3-year strategic campaign goals are to have ranked choice voting used for general elections for all state and federal races, and to enable ranked choice voting to be adopted for all local elections through voter initiative. With the exception of elections for governor and lieutenant governor, that is a separate battle down the road. There are some additional hurdles that make things a little bit more complicated for those races, and that's due to language in the Constitution that states candidates have to win the most votes. Very specific wording, the most votes, as opposed to a majority, which is what ranked choice voting requires. This would require a constitutional amendment for these two races. So we're going to be focusing on other local, state, and federal races with the governorship down the road. How do we do it? How do we get ranked choice voting in place for these elections? So really, ultimately, what this boils down to, and David also highlighted this, is, you know, we want everyone in New Jersey to know ranked choice voting, understand it, support it, and turn that support into action. And this is how we'll build the power that we need to win. That's at the grassroots level. We'll be doing that through visibility, education, public support, and action. Then at the state level, we'll be working on passing some bills for ranked choice voting to enable ranked choice voting for local elections, and a bill requiring ranked choice voting for state and federal elections. So we'll be working with legislators to pass that bill, and we'll work to pass town resolutions to call on the state to pass that bill. So local organizing is really, really important. We don't want to just pass state bills that allow ranked choice voting use in local elections. We want to actually use ranked choice voting in as many local elections as possible. So we'll be working with activists on the ground to help pass ranked choice voting in their own towns through local ordinances or through voter initiatives. And that just means, the voter initiative means getting a question on the ballot for voters to decide directly. So there is a lot to do, and thankfully a lot of people are excited to get involved. So the way that ranked choice voting is kind of mobilizing this local organizing, again, is to launch town teams, and through us providing support, a support structure for local activists. And we do that through resources and sample materials, training, strategic guidance, and state connections. And then I already touched on the organizing part through petitions, recruitment, candidate and local official engagement, and then visibility through digital organizing, events, and media. Here's just an org chart. We're really laying the groundwork for all of this activity that will enable ranked choice voting in New Jersey. And so to do that, we have a model here for our organizational structure. That's people, money, and endorsements. With this framework, ranked choice voting is divided into roughly 13 teams. All of these teams are managed by a team leader and a deputy team leader. And from this chart, you can kind of see how all of the teams are organized here under endorsements. I'm in the Speakers Bureau. This org chart has changed slightly, so we'll need to update this. But essentially, this is how we're organized. These functions are designed to tackle the task at hand. We have weekly team meetings, and then we have a monthly meeting, one monthly meeting that is open for folks to join, anyone to join. And this is where we focus on recruitment and growing the movement. Couldn't end the presentation without a call to action. So if you are so inclined, we would love to have you, I know you're all doing some wonderful things with Represent Us, and we'd love to hear more from you as well and have your support. So I'll ask David's permission to link some of our social media channels if you're not already familiar with us there. We'd love to have you sign some petitions. I'm sure some of you have, and you have your own as well. We'd love to bring this across the finish line. So please continue to advocate as you're doing for ranked choice voting. We're so happy to work with you, increasing citizen participation and enhancing government transparency. Thank you very much. We do have some time, I believe, for Q&A.
I think the organization chart that Veronica showed toward the end perhaps illustrates very graphically, literally, the complexity and the enormity of the challenge ahead of us. If it's 13 teams, that's an impressive number. The frequency of meetings is impressive. The bottom line, the takeaway for us, and I'm sure it's fair to say for Voter Choice New Jersey and for other partners, is this is a job that's too big for any one organization alone. And the best approach that we can mount to achieve a victory is to bring our different resources to bear on a positive outcome. There's two bills in the current legislature, Assembly Bill A4744, and more specifically, Senate Bill 2992, the latter sponsored by State Senator Shirley Turner, who's a long-term reform advocate in the state Senate. And we're working very closely with Senator Turner. We're trying mightily. We'll see if we're successful. We all know what's happened in New Jersey if you follow local politics, and the near tsunami that occurred on election day, confounding expectations for the outcome in terms of the governor's race, but also the leadership of the state Senate. But we're hoping to get a hearing on Senator Turner's bill during this lame duck session. And we're working on that. And we have a campaign that I think very much parallels everything that Veronica has said today to bring public attention to the need. We want to see this bill expanded. I think it's very much in conformity with the emphasis that Veronica placed in terms of voter choice New Jersey. Specifically, we'd like to see the bill go from single seat elections to multi-seat elections. And we'd also like to see the number of towns that qualify under either the Assembly or the Senate bill increase substantially. You know, we're the third smallest state in the country, but we are densely populated, and we have over 500 different incorporated towns, villages, and cities. And we think that the number of opportunities for our citizens to participate in the program that Veronica has described so vividly and eloquently is something that really should define what citizens are looking for today. So again, thank you very much, Veronica. I'm going to, again, we use this raised hand approach. Steve, you've been patient on this, so I'm going to ask Steve Barrett to unmute himself, and then Herb, please, if you have things to add, or anyone else, of course, please go ahead. But Steve, let's hear from you.
Well, thank you, David. No secret, you and I have worked together on open primaries, ranked choice voting within Represent Us proudly. And we seem to start every presentation with the comment that New Jersey is not a statutory or not an INR state. And so, Veronica, excellent presentation. Really appreciate the layout of ranked choice voting, and clearly we need to get there. But I'm wondering, how would your strategy change if New Jersey went ahead and had INR? We're losing the race. All these other states with INR are beating us to the post. And I'm wondering what would happen to your strategy if we had the opportunity to pass things through initiative and referendum?
Okay, I'm gonna have Herb, if he doesn't mind, help to answer this because he is part of the executive team and would probably be able to speak to it a little better than me. Herb, do you mind jumping in?
No, not at all. Thanks, Veronica, and great job today. And I just want to point out, Veronica did a lot of great work in developing this presentation for our team. So thank you very much for that, Veronica. Steve, as you know, we're working, you and I have been working on trying to get the initiative referendum going in New Jersey somehow. The model seems to work a little bit more easily in the states that have initiative, because the groundswell of citizen support actually leads to a ballot initiative. So I think that if we did have initiative referendum, we very well might change our strategy to pursue citizens initiative. Part of our strategy also is that we envision that the bills that we would like to see introduced, that local initiative would be required, so that the citizens would have to vote on ranked choice voting in their town for it to be enabled. So that's also part of because we do have initiative and referendum at the local level in some municipalities in New Jersey. Does that answer your question, Steve?
Yeah, I think so, Herb. I guess the question is, all of these things are analogous with pushing a huge boulder up a hill. And the question, I guess, is it easier to push the INR boulder up the hill, and does that make it easier to get everything else passed? Open primaries, ranked choice voting, redistricting reform, but I this turned into a filibuster, and I didn't intend for that.
Yeah, well, that's it. Well, that's kind of the big question about which one's going to pay off in the long run better or faster, is whether we go for the more fundamental changes, which are more systemic, or whether we push, incremental changes. I don't think any of us really know the answer, but I know David's had some success back with the dark money bill in getting some traction and getting some work done in the legislature. And that's really what we're looking to do right now, is to start to influence legislators, especially now in the lame duck session. And then as there'll be 7 new senators in office come January, and I think about the same number of assembly people. So that might be helpful also.
I'm going to I'm bad at predictions. I've never won the lottery, so I'm not going to be able to predict any outcomes here. But I'm going to say, before we recognize our next questioner, I'm going to say that the point I made a second ago about the fact that the election rocked New Jersey. I mean, the establishment is still, the Democrats, is still trying to figure out what happened on November 2nd, and in the nearly 2 weeks following. I know there's a real push to create uniformity and an improved state registration system for vote counting, so that the disparity that occurred between the 3 options that people had on November 2nd, mail-in, early voting the 10 days before November 2nd, and same-day voting, that somehow this disconnect didn't lead to all sorts of allegations of voter fraud and conspiracy thinking and so forth, which we've seen elsewhere in this country mushroom. So that's clearly one of the things that they're doing now. But the point I'm heading toward is, I think we're at a very fertile moment here. I mean, I think there's an opportunity here to make a case for fundamental reforms, and we're pushing the RCV or the instant runoff. And I hope there's no confusion between the two. For those who are still new to the process, the way that Veronica described the outcome after the first round, if there's no majority winner, which would be the equivalent of a traditional voting outcome, and you go through the distribution, that's where instant runoff kicks in. That's what instant runoff is, immediately. So it's linked integrally to RCV. RCV is 1, 2, 3, 4, chocolate, strawberry, vanilla, peach. And instant runoff is the process that accounts when you discover that the peach vote was the minority, received the less, and there's that distribution. But anyway, we're at a fertile moment. We have with us, and I'm going to ask Lindsay Cormack to unmute herself, professor of political science, Stevens Institute of Technology, and going to be our featured speaker in a very lively debate. You're going to want to be with us on December 18th, when Professor Cormack and a spokesperson on behalf of RCV engage in what I think will be a very interesting debate on this whole subject. So I won't preempt your talk, Lindsay, but thanks very much for joining us today. Could you unmute yourself and share your questions or thoughts with us?
First of all, I wanted to thank you all for being so dedicated to doing something. And David, I think you're right that the time is now to be pushing for these sorts of change. And I think there's impetus to do it. My question to this group, which will be the same sort of thing that we talk about on the 18th, is do you think that there's room to expand this sort of initiative to something beyond RCV? So also allowing something like approval voting, so that there's more local choice for municipalities who get to implement it. So the bill then would be something that would allow ranked choice voting or approval voting to be determined by the municipal level. That's the question.
For now, our focus is on ranked choice voting. But Herb, do you have more to say about approval voting?
Yeah, I agree that with the sentiment that local jurisdictions should be able to choose how they vote and elect people, whether it be approval voting, there's other star voting, there's other methods. I think we landed on ranked choice voting because of the momentum that's currently out there in the country. And so that's why I think that's the main reason we've been focusing on ranked choice voting, that we think has the most momentum and chance of getting implemented. And like I said, my personal opinion is that any local jurisdiction should choose the way that they vote. And that's kind of how our strategy was developed, meaning that, we want municipalities to step up and say to the state that the state doesn't have a right to dictate how they choose their local officials, that the municipality should be able to choose how they choose not only who's elected, but also the process by which they're elected. But ranked choice voting seems to have the most momentum right now.
The bills that are in the Assembly and Senate, do they need to pass in order for towns, municipalities to decide that they might want to have ranked choice voting in their elections? In other words, is it an empowering bill necessary, or can the municipalities decide without that being passed?
I'll take that. Yeah, right now our assumption is that we need state level enabling legislation to permit municipalities. There was a fellow at our last meeting who seemed to think that Board of Educations might be able to do it unilaterally, but I'm not sure if that's true or not. But we also looking at the Board of Education elections as a place where ranked choice voting would hopefully get a lot of traction, because a lot of the elections for the school boards do have 8 or 10 candidates running for 3 spots. And we did an analysis of this past year's election, and we found over 3 dozen school board candidates who got elected with less than a majority of the votes.
The data says that the current bill, I think, applies to 88 towns that have so-called nonpartisan elections. And a lot of those are school board elections. And it refers to single seat elections. We want to change both of those, as I said in my comments. We want them to be multiple seat elections. And we want to increase the numbers so that the 500 plus towns in New Jersey have the option. This is not a mandatory, but have the option to do precisely what we're talking about today. So I'm going to say again, Veronica, thank you very much. Delighted you can make some time from your visit, your location in Austin, Texas, a truly blue city in a truly red state. Interesting dynamic going on in the state of Texas for sure. But that doesn't excuse New Jersey. We're not by any means exempt from that. So again, thank you very much. Questions are always welcome. Follow-up is welcome. It's what we're all about. And I think we've established a good reputation over the years, being pretty quick and getting back to people if you have questions. Until next time, please have a good and safe and healthy holiday. Thanks very much.